Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first episode of the Intergrove, where we are analyzing threats to the EU ecosystems. This is a live stream of the complete process where we dive into our target subject, and the material of this stream will be edited into YouTube videos and will be posted to Substack in a form of articles and newsletters, hopefully. So, what kind of toxicity we are talking about? Where are these kids that are getting poisoned within the EU? There are hundreds of different locations where this is happening day to day, and I understand that, let's say globally, all eyes are on Gaza right now. If not on Gaza, then on the eastern front of Ukraine. But sadly, human rights are regularly violated in so-called peaceful and even rich EU countries as well. And right now we are going to focus on a problem in Central Europe, these countries like Poland, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, and similar countries have been part of the European Union for a pretty long time now. And yet there is an ongoing slow violence, an ongoing human rights violation within their borders to some extent. And there are some Western European countries as well which are affected by what are we talking about today and what we will be researching together about. We are basing this conversation today on the conference of the EEB, the European Environmental Bureau, which was held in Cluj, or also known as Kolozsvár in its Hungarian name, in Romania. It's one of the most important, richest, and technologically developed cities of the country. Average living standards are pretty much around the European standards, and this has been the location of this Environmental Justice for Roma Communities conference. This is how it was titled. So, what are we talking about exactly? Again, who is getting poisoned and what is environmental justice? Everything will unfold soon enough. So I have to approach this step by step. I've been at this conference. So what I will be talking about, mostly I want to share my experience. I want to tell you how this conference went and what did I see there. And we will build from there. Okay? So what is environmental justice or environmental injustice? According to the developers of this concept, the fight against racism and environmental protection efforts are not enough. They are not enough to protect marginalized communities who are forced to live in areas where the air is poisonous, where where toxic material is leaking into drinking water sources, and it poisons the soil as well. There are a lot of areas like this all over Europe, and for some reason, the probably hundreds of thousands of people who live in these live in areas with these conditions within the EU, these areas are not considered as acute emergencies. So we are not seeing like a very effective, quick, widespread reaction from the states and from the various organizations like human rights organizations, or I'm talking about relief efforts here. You don't see this, and you don't really you only experience this if you actually go to these areas, like drive through them or walk around the city and find yourself within an area like this. So according to the writers or designers of the concepts of environmental injustice, there are systemic reasons for the development of this situation. And it is getting more and more serious. So special intervention would be more than justified, but it's not happening. And it's a very interesting thing to look at. I think it's an ongoing crisis. It has very severe risks to the majority. Let's say the majority populations. From a legal point of view, it's unacceptable. Economically, it's dangerous and a waste of valuable resources, because these areas shouldn't be just left alone and go to waste. And these are obviously areas where environmental damage is very severe in a lot of cases, but it's only on top of the very serious human damage, the people who live there, the suffering of the people who live in those areas. And it's from an outside point of view, it's probably really hard to understand that why are even people living in like this? Why don't they just move, or why don't they ask for help? Or it's really hard to understand and imagine that within the EU we don't have a framework, we don't have a system, pretty much a similar system to, let's say, asylum seeking. Like, you come from a war-torn country as a refugee, there is a legal process. How can you apply and register yourself as a refugee? But I don't know about a similar system to people who are in a life situation. I'm talking about citizens of the European Union right now. So if you are find yourself in a situation like this, there is no clear way ahead, no clear institution to turn to. Okay, so you can't really ignore the fact that most of these communities are Roma communities, or a majority of them are Roma people who have to deal with this. And this is also significant because it shows that there is something specific. There must be something specific going on in the background, even if, of course, there are many different kind of human suffering coming from environmental damage, or misused or mistreated wastewater or garbage. And not only the Roma are affected, but you can say that they are affected disproportionately. So why is this happening when most of the EU countries with a significant Roma population have some sort of strategic framework going on, and the EU has been focusing, let's say, at least in words, to solve the integration of the Roma population? And by integration, at this point, I only mean providing the basic human rights that are granted for an average EU citizen, but somehow in many cases they are not granted for the Roma. So there are specific national measures related to environmental protection, housing programs, of course, health programs, employment, social protection, and education policy. And we also have these Roma strategic frameworks. But the situation like this, the situation that we can see around Cluj, at Patarat, are still with us. It's still a harsh reality for many people. So the choice of the location for this conference is obviously not accidental. It's because Patarat, or in Hungarian Patarit, which means hoof meadow, is a location outside Cluj, and there are about 1,500 people living there, most of them Roma, in 4 different informal settlements around this area. the center of this area is the Patarat landfill. It is located only a few kilometers from the city center of Kolozsvár, which is an IT hub of Romania at the moment. So leaks from the landfill contaminate the soil and the groundwater there, and the residents often suffer from ear, eye, and skin infections, asthma, bronchitis, high blood pressure, heart, and stomach problems. Obviously, the rate of birth defects and abnormally developing children is high, hence the title of this stream right now. So this is how we are poisoning our kids within the EU. At least this is one very spectacular way of doing so. And believe it or not, the population of this settlement right now in 2023, it's at 1,500, but it's growing. Okay, so as you can see, you can approach this problem from a lot of different angles. Environmental, economic, social. Honestly, I think it should be approached from a tactical standpoint. Like the most logical solution would be to mobilize national resources and just look at these areas and handle them like they were crisis zones. For example, when an earthquake happens or a wildfire or something, then of course we mobilize and we help the people living there, and we do everything, and by we I mean the institutions of the states, of the nation states that are members of the EU. We usually have when we have an ongoing crisis like this, there is a swift response. And it's honestly, it's very hard to understand why this situation is just basically ignored. There are hundreds of, maybe thousands of locations like Patarat all over the EU, and not just in Central Europe, but it's let's say it's mostly a Central European problem. But as we will see later on, there are many examples for environmental injustice in Western Europe as well, and in those cases, the local Roma populations are affected as well. Obviously, as I said, many other like cultures, skin color, religion, national identity, it doesn't matter. Many kind of people are affected by this. Even in Budapest, the capital of Hungary, and there are basically toxic areas within the city that with very serious toxic waste problems. Maybe I will have the chance to talk about this later if we have the time. But it's a generic problem. But the problem which this conference tries to tackle, unique in a way, it's mostly are Roma people are affected. The European Roma are seen in many ways completely unique. They are considered a minority, and their characteristics and problems often differ from those observed in other European minorities and marginalized groups. So this is one of the reasons that the organizers of the conference feel like this problem could be and should be tackled from this point of view, that it's somehow the Roma are suffering for some systemic reasons, and this is what should be uncovered. And this is how maybe the way opens up to just remove these areas of shame, let's say, within the EU, because it's shameful that this is going on. And by removing, I obviously I'm meaning, let's say, removing the human rights violation. So helping those people live under conditions that adhere to basic human rights regulations. So what are these systemic causes? How this came to be? It's based on historical foundations. One of the first speakers was Izabela Michalas, a representative of the European Roma umbrella organization called ERGO. It's an umbrella NGO. she brought up the concept of anti-gypsyism because it seems that there is some sort of very unique and historically based kind of racism against the Roma. So it's not like racism in general, it's something specific to, let's say, European history and society. In Europe, the concept of environmental justice is considered new, and it has only just begun to be recognized by the Court of Justice of the EU. The European Parliament began to deal with this issue, with the issue of environmental justice or injustice under pressure from civilians, actually, and the first relevant studies were only published in 2016, whereas these things, as you will see later on, in some cases, certainly in the case of Patarat, have been going on for 5 decades now, from the 70s. Presumably, the question can gain momentum with some sort of difficulty because Central European states are much more involved in this problem, and the phenomenon is rarely known in Western countries, and if it's usually different, it's a bit different. So they have no first-hand experience on how these specific problems differ from the general minority protection and anti-racist problems, anti-racism problems. There is a quote I used when I wrote an article about this conference. Actually, I put this in the title. Isabella Mihalás said that who lives near what is the result of political decisions. And this is basically, this is a basic important claim of this conference. Okay, another speaker in the conference was Dragos Pislaru, head of the Social and Labor Committee of Renew Europe, and he had a pretty long and meandering speech, but one of the key things I thought was interesting and really on point is a description about why our societies are not mobilizing, let's say, to solve this problem, because imagine if, due to some unknown catastrophe or some major malfunction, a big toxic spill happens, like in the outskirts of London, or like some garbage, maybe a wall crumbles or something, and there is some sort of spilling, and the neighborhood area suffers from that, suffers from the smell at first, maybe, or the smoke if there is fire, and or just imagine that in any bigger Western country there is a municipality, there is a part of town, and the drinking water, suddenly there is a drop in the quality of the drinking water, and measurements, the professionals come out and they measure it, and they say that, okay, this is harmful in some extent to the health of the locals. Any major city. Can you imagine what happens next? Obviously, what you will see, I think, is that this will be a major story in the news for the next coming days and weeks until it is. So the steps that are taken, they will be reported by the media, and there will be pretty close scrutiny, because the people who live in these areas will be very vocal about it, obviously. It's like you are used to clean water coming from the tap, and then now you don't have it. You have to solve it in other ways, and it's due to something toxic and poisonous, a leak or something. It's not like a technical issue. Then of course you will be pretty vocal about it, and it will be a very sensitive, passionate issue. And I would venture a bet that the state would mobilize special resources. In Hungary, we call this catastrophe protection, but I'm sure that every country has a sort of institution which is kind of first response in the case of something major. So it's not like the firefighters, it's not like when the ambulance goes out to those to help those in a car crash or something. So something bigger. So trucks and lots of people, and of course the water source would be solved. So getting clear water would be no problem, because it would be just provided by any means possible until the basic water system is repaired. And the steps of this repairing process would be closely followed, and everyone would be interested. So, so it would be a big thing in the media. If something like Patarat would just appear. But maybe one of the key aspects of this problem that Patarat appeared in a smaller scale many decades ago, and it just grew bigger and bigger, and no one cared back then, and no one cares now, basically. Obviously, we couldn't say that no one cares, but as you will see later on, many things might have happened, but the situation didn't change that much, and it's only getting worse. Okay, so what did Mr. Pislaru say? He said that, and I can resonate with this very much, that from a municipality point of view, so let's say the leadership of Cluj, from that point of view, they completely lack the intention that in the face of initial difficulties, this could be treated as an investment to improve the conditions of those affected, since by settling the situation, everyone would win, including majority society, not just the people who live right now under these horrible conditions, not only in a social sense, but also in a material sense, because then you can provide. So when these people can have decent homes, they have the ability to go to jobs, to go to work and get. Hello? Go to work. And so neighborhoods, value creating neighborhoods could be created on the place of these places that could only be described as crisis zones right now. And these crisis zones are currently using, in a way, you could say wasting resources, because they need constant attention. So in the face of social funds. There are many social funding programs going on in all of these countries, and obviously you can apply them at people who live under these conditions and are poor in general and have low access to jobs. From Patarat, it's very hard to even go to school, for example, because obviously there is no bus that stops at a largely illegal location. They don't even have a pedestrian crossing, and it's right next to a road which is outside the official area of the municipality of Cluj. So you can imagine cars and trucks going by at 90 kilometers per hour, and maybe you have to cross it several times a day. So the infrastructure, which is completely natural and, let's say, it's like automatic for an average EU city dweller, it's not there. So it's not like they are living in toxic conditions. It's not only that, they also have to deal with they need to put extra effort in doing things like which come naturally to people who are not suffering from, let's say, environmental injustice, maybe. Okay. So if there was a focused effort to, let's say, fix the houses, or just provide some sort of accommodation and provide some clear water, even if it means that you bring this clear water with trucks until you cannot find an easy way to build a pipeline, maybe not in a system that is considered average or basic, because that costs a lot. Maybe some sort of special system, until you provide the basics and the community will start to get in a better shape. And let's say when the community is in a shape where you can tax it just like regular, you have tax income, then you can provide services for them as well. So, but it won't happen if you just let things run their course, because you can see right now that they can't climb out of this situation. People who live there, this is kind of the same as the poverty trap. Last year I created a video. It's in Hungarian, but I will maybe provide at least an English text, and we'll link it to you, where I wrote about the bootcamp model, or spoke about the bootcamp model. That why is it it's considered a success in the world of IT. So what is the bootcamp? In a bootcamp, the students get very intensive training in programming, and it can be done in let's say, depending on what kind of education they can get, of course, or what kind of programming languages they learn. But usually the bootcamps I know about operate with a education window of, let's say, 6 months or 1 year or maybe 2 years max. And this is a very intensive training, but they get, after you complete this training, you are basically 100%, your chance is basically 100% to get hired. And many of these boot camps are set up in a way that actually, if you go through it, you have to take a job at the end, and the companies will already be waiting for you, and you can even get accommodated to your new job before you even finish your studies as an intern or something. And many companies are involved in the training as well. And there are many low skill, let's say, jobs that are in huge, especially in construction, that are in huge demand right now. In Hungary, a few years back, it was crazy. Now it's a little bit normalized because the steam is running out of the Hungarian economy right now. So construction sector is not booming that much as it has been. But it's still, you can say that there is huge demand for professionals who can build basic stuff and work in construction and fix your bathroom, fix your appliances, electricians, plumbers, many sort of experts. And these people the poor communities in Europe, which in Hungary as well as in other parts of Europe, in Central Europe, as you mentioned earlier, not only the people who live around toxic waste, those people has a disproportionately high number of Roma. So it's mostly Roma communities are affected, but you can say that let's say deep poverty or the areas of the countries where poor villages are next to each other and there is low infrastructure in general, you will find that they are mostly populated by the Roma as well. So in that case, we can again target this as a specifically a problem which affects the Roma. So we should be try to uncover why is this happening to them. So that's why I say that maybe we can focus on recruiting the Roma and set up boot camps where in a system like a college, and you start from basic stuff at the boot camp, like which should be provided by formal education, like properly reading and writing. But in many cases, it's not provided, especially if you are a poor Roma kid in a poor environment, in a backwater area of the country you are living in. It's not provided for you. So, I mean, the institutional solution would be to, well, let's develop the schools, let's make them better, and let's focus on improving education and making sure it reaches every village and this kind of stuff. But it doesn't happening. It feels too slow. So again, a tactical solution on the short term, in my opinion, would be better than working on hopefully a major institutional solution, because it would take decades. And so I just wanted to link basically this earlier thought about recruiting young people living in poverty to very focused, very practical, and in a college, so where they can sleep as well, provided with accommodation and meals and everything they need to properly finish these studies. These maybe 6 months is enough, if they can start working with a professional, together with a professional who has a bigger experience. And you might obviously ask that, okay, where is the money? So who will pay for this? And the answer is that the students will pay themselves. The only difference is that they are not paying in advance; they are paying it later, because it's subtracted from the wages they earn. And you can earn pretty good money right now, because these professions are there is huge demand for them in the market. And this is exactly how IT bootcamps are working. You don't necessarily have to pay in advance. They will subtract the money. The school will subtract the tuition fee from your wages later. So this is what I think Mr. Pislaru meant, that there is no creative thinking, there is no treating these locations and these people as a possibility, as an investment of sorts. Okay, so this is one aspect, and another thing he said is which I found interesting, is that one explanation to why these situations can basically exist within in the EU, and it's a problem due to the political system. So if you are helping out the Roma, many of the Roma are not voters there due to multiple reasons, whole multitude of reasons, and helping them sadly will not bring many votes from the people who actually can vote either. So what you are doing as a politician is that you are putting effort into helping an area which will bring you no votes, and it doesn't make it worthwhile. So the politicians, mainstream politicians, are not motivated because of this, to handle these issues. They are motivated to put it under the rug, just as it has always been happening for decades now. Like ignore it happens, or just come up with some superficial solutions that are covering the most harmful effects. Because the majority population does not care about the Roma, so the majority population will not, let's say, thank the political leadership if a human rights violation situation is changed in a garbage dump, people living around literally in garbage. We will see some examples and later. So when I say something like the majority of the society doesn't really care, or it doesn't see it as beneficial if politicians help the Roma or initiate programs to spend money on developing the area where they are living, that might sound a bit harsh, but in a simplistic way, it's a good description of the reality, because honestly, and this is why anti-Gypsyism should maybe considered as a good concept, that the racism against Roma is quite different to racism against any other race, basically in a European context. Because Central European, the people who live in Central Europe are used to the existence and the close, so they have hundreds of years of experience with living with Roma, and they're culturally very much intertwined. If you think about things like music or many words we use, it comes from their language, and there are negative and positive aspects as well associated to Romas. But in general, you could say that the standard approach of a random Central European probably could be considered racist if you look at the end result. Okay, so let's talk about what the Roma themselves experience about this, because luckily some of them have been at the conference. For example, Linda Greta Giga, who has a significant activist history and is known throughout the EU by now. This is a Hungarian article. So she actually, let's translate this for you. So actually, she was in the EP. She has been, and she had a political career, let's say, started, and she comes from Patarat, but her story is a great description about why even Patarat exists and how do people end up living there. But so what I want to highlight here, which was very interesting to hear, is that there are actually Roma involved even in the European Parliament, or somewhere in the European decision-making process, or institutions, who come from Patarat. For more than they are known, and they are trying their best to help the situation. For some of them, for more than 20 years now. And there are like partial successes. Like dozens of families managed to organize their housing there. You could say that there is a single student who is attending Harvard now, who comes from Patarat. many people living there have their papers in order, so they have jobs. They are working at most of them are working at the garbage facility right next to their living areas. But the overall picture is that it's 1,500 people still live there with no substantial change. So imagine that you are a guest regularly in the European Commission, even, or that you are a politician working in Brussels, or you are a Roma politician living in Romania, traveling to Brussels regularly. And there was a speaker, not Linda, another speaker who I didn't catch the name of because she wasn't introduced. She was just asking a question from the audience. Roma politician, and she said that she's been traveling to the European Parliament for 13 years now. So it's quite understandable when she literally says that she's fed up with discussions. So can you imagine, like, you know that your relatives are getting poisoned basically day by day, and you are going to conferences and workshops and hearings, and people are doing researches, and they come up with something and they suggest stuff, and maybe something happens, but not that much. It's really painful to think about how this all looks like from the situation of the affected people. I wouldn't even want to say Roma, because although this looks like a specifically Roma problem, there are many people who are not Roma who are affected as well. So this is why this subject is incredibly complex and worth taking a look at. So a day before the conference, I attended a workshop, and I had this. Even before I heard this woman speak about her tribulations, like 13 years going to Brussels and back to Romania to no avail. Let's say. So we had an activity at the workshop where we are in a group try to formulate the principles of environmental justice. And one of the key thoughts I brought home from this conference, that there is a huge difference and discrepancy between action and words, and it feels very strange to formulate principles, like talk about what are the basic rules of environmental justice should be, when a few kilometers from you there are Roma children who are breathing toxic air and they are struggling with serious diseases only just because they are living there. So that's one of the major key points that again, I say this, I consider this as a tactical. I'm missing the tactical aspect from all the solutions, because this conference is a great. It's probably a useful stepping stone towards an institutional solution, but you can say that you can guess that it's a long-term solution, if any. So if something comes up from these kind of conferences, like a positive result for these communities that are affected, it will not happen overnight. They are very important and should be done, but it very much feels like they should be, like, we need to have a long-term process initiated like this, an institutional level solution, but only while we also have a tactical solution as well. I mean, not solution, but there should be, if 50, 100 people are living there, I would say that at least 50 or 100 people and some trucks and some machinery should be working 24/7 to make sure that these people are not under immediate threat. Okay, so that they have access to somewhat clean air. Of course, that's the hardest to provide, but at least clear water, and a solution should be found where they are not forced to live inside makeshift houses on toxic soil right next to huge garbage dumps. I don't know. I don't feel so. They told us, Linda, Greta, Giga for example, told us that the city administration, if you even reach them, which is pretty hard, they will react with, okay, here is a tender, like here is a grant, okay, let's use this and go away, we don't want to hear about you. So there is no effort to systemic solution, and this comes back to what Mr. Pislaru, Dragos Pislaru said, what I mentioned earlier, that there is no political motivation, there is no value to be gained politically from working on this issue, although what I said is that I truly think that it's great value because to be gained, because you can create if you can solve a complicated problem like this, it's a huge success story, and that will make waves. And I'm sure that it will. For example, if the municipality of Cluj would assign resources to develop a tactical level solution, it could be used as a best practice all over Europe, and of course those who designed it would be known worldwide, and they would receive awards and all this kind of stuff. They would be celebrated, and all the people, even IT people and whatever kind of people live in Cluj, they could be very proud of the city they live in, because look at this complex problem and look how how much we care about the poor or Roma people living in this city, because Cluj is for everyone. We are inclusive. It's the problem is great, but it's very visible. It has an environmental aspect and a social aspect and a racism aspect as well. So all of the hot topics basically are included. It's like these are like focus points of big global processes and complex problems. So they should be focused on, I think, because when you need to decide what do you want to work on, you might as well start to work on the biggest problem at hand, in my opinion. Oh, and of course, this is a rural and urban development philosophy as well. I knew about one of the Hungarian leader groups, which is a rural development program, which is powered by the EU mostly, and it's about giving the local communities the opportunity to design rural development plans for themselves. So like local rural communities can decide what they want to do and what they want to do in their own communities, what kind of developments they want to see. Mostly this means infrastructural, like renewable energy kind of stuff, and local food system stuff, farms and things that help the small businesses. So the leader of one of these leader groups told me that no, it's actually not he told me that it was the final line in every single one of his presentations. He used this as the final slide, this quote from himself. I think he came up with it, is that you need to find the poorest village first, and you need to find the poorest home of the poorest village, and then put the brick in the wall, put a brick in the wall of that village well. So to fit it well, and so you put a good brick in that wall, and that is the point where basically the new Hungary, the new country, will be built upon. So that's like a philosophy that you need to focus on the worst and eliminate the worst and build from there. It's obviously it's just a nice thought and you can challenge it or whatever, but it feels like it has some innate power, because it's not just an economic issue, it's a social issue, it's a human rights issue, and it's about human compassion, really. Okay, let's talk about environmental injustice in a more practical level. On the conference, there were presentations where the lecturers brought international examples of cases of environmental racism and forcing people into polluted, unlivable areas. And they called this process slow violence. So I want to share some of these examples. These are from a presentation by Diego Marin, the policy officer of EEB. So what is environmental racism? There are some case studies in Western Europe as well. You can see my cursor now, which is I found. Okay, there it is. Yeah. So there are many situations like this in Western Europe as well, not just Romania or similar countries. The first case study is about Heidelberg, Germany. In the 1930s, the city built simple residential homes for the Sinti Roma. It's a community of Roma on the original site of their camp. So they lived in a camp, and in the 30s, the city decided to build, let's say, normal houses for them. But later, chemical plants were built in the area. So they built them houses, but somehow later they found that chemical factories are coming out of the ground right in their neighborhood. It polluted the residential area, obviously. Ironically, this happened again not long ago. 220 refugees got their housing constructed on the same spot. So this is where you can see that historic racism towards the Roma, they are very much ingrained in local societies, and they don't even realize it in many cases. So that's why you can't just say that it will get better after. You need some outside resources and focus to change these things. Another case study is from France, Lille. In France, the Roma has been officially referred to as travelers, traveling people. I'm not willing to try to pronounce this without the help of Google Translate.
Gens délután voyage.
No, not this language. We need French. Oh my god, where is French? There you are.
Gens du voyage. Gens du voyage.
Gens du voyage. Gens du voyage. No, voyage. Gens du voyage. This is how the French refer to the Roma, because they are people who travel, you know. It's for hundreds of years, yeah. This has been the norm. And in 1990, you could say that, come on, what a progressive initiation. All towns with more than 5,000 inhabitants have been required to have a reception area for the gens du voyage, which is the only authorized place for them to live. So obviously, after a while, people have been fed up with traveling gypsies just setting up camp here and there where they thought suitable. So the state tried to be progressive about it and forced every single municipality, like with more than 5,000 inhabitants, to assign an area that if traveling people are coming to town, this area will be available for them. Now, guess what? Researchers studied these areas, 1,358 cases, and many of these, I'm not sure about the yeah. Yeah, so you can see there are quite a lot of red dots, right, on the map. A lot of red dots over here as well. So we can't say for sure, like, how many of these locations are actually toxic, let's say. Okay, so we don't know for sure, but it's quite a lot. It looks like 30% at least, maybe 40, maybe even more. And these areas, the red dots you see in the map of France, so these areas are obviously near waste processing facilities or chemical plants or sewage treatment plants or power plants for that matter, and highways and railroad tracks. So obviously these are areas which are where none of us would like to live, like next to a railroad track. You know how it be. Chemical plants, obviously not. Sewage treatment plants. So somehow, some way, when the municipalities like assign these locations, so either they assign these locations that are not, no one is interested to go there and buy, let's say, build a family home there, but this will be good for the traveling people, would be the thinking behind it. I don't know. This is one thing that could happen. And the other thing that happens is that new industries pop up, and somehow they are always, when they assign the areas, okay, this is the development area, we can build our new sewage treatment plant over here, and they see on the map that it's right next to the area that is assigned for gens du voyage, but they just blink and go on, like they don't see the problem with it. They don't see that they think that it's only a temporary anyway, so it's not that problematic for them. But you know, it can be. It's quite problematic in the first place, but it's also very problematic when something like this happens. So September 26, 2019, a fire broke out, and adjacent to the plant is a reception area for gens du voyage. Gens du voyage. Unfortunately, the residents were unable to evacuate, and emergency services did not provide them with adequate assistance. So imagine like this is like an industrial area, warehouses. This is the chemical plant. This is another plant. That's the city somewhere in the hills. And imagine that you are a traveling people community and you are located somewhere here, like next to this area, behind this towering building, and right next to the railroad maybe. And you don't even get the information. You don't know what's going on, and this thick smoke is just suffocates you basically, and there is no help coming because you are just spending time in an area reserved for traveling people, and obviously the relief efforts will focus on the regular residents, like evacuating them and making sure that they are not breathing in the polluted air, maybe toxic, maybe deadly, who knows. So you find yourself just left there. Okay, so it's bad enough as it is, but when something really bad happens, it can turn really, really, really bad. Okay, and after these examples, a question came on a conference from the audience, and it was more like a story shared. An attendant from Sweden shared that actually next to Stockholm in Sweden, in the forests right next to the city, there are already more than 800 Romanian Roma are living. And the authorities sometimes go and visit them and ask them to leave, and then they leave. And then a few years go by and they go back again and ask them to leave, and and the authorities leave, I mean. And the Roma are just there, and their number is growing in the forest next to Stockholm. And this has been going on for no less than 12 years. So more than a decade. There is an illegal camp right next to one of the most important Swedish cities. So you can say from this example that the institutional system is literally incapable of handling these situations. They just don't have the methods, and no one is working on these methods, and no one is sending them relief. These people, they are like, imagine like, I don't know, 500 Germans are suddenly, I don't know, after a plane crash or something, like 300 survivors are finding themselves in the forest, that they would be safe there from there and sent home and provided assistance. It's hard to come up with an example that doesn't sound ridiculous, because obviously the situation of Germans surviving an airplane crash, and Roma who travel there, that's completely different. But there are not the key of this problem is that there are no situations that are similar. So this is why the normal institutions, they don't have the tools to deal with this, and somehow the effort is lacking. The effort is lacking to come up with a proper solution to this situation. So should I be solving the issue of 800 Roma people living in shacks and tents in a forest next to Stockholm, right here from my office, from the other side of Europe. Obviously, it would be a bit stupid to think like I can suggest something which would work, but it's interesting to see that somehow the effort looks very low and let's say uncreative, to say the least. Okay. So at this point, we should briefly familiarize, how do I say this word? Familiarize ourselves with the history of the local example, Patarat. So how do these Roma got there? Why do they live in such conditions, and why don't they leave? For an average European citizen who is able to watch this video or stream, these answers probably not very clear. For the answers for these questions are not very clear at first. So let's analyze it a little bit. I would like to introduce you to Olimpiu Béla Lakatos Jakab, who again has been working to help the residents of Patarat for 19 years. Yeah, Olimpiu. It was a great. It wasn't even a presentation. It was a panel talk, so it was just a speech from him. But he told us the story of Patarat itself. So the first colony, they is dated from the 1970s, and it is known as Dallas. You know, like Dallas, Texas. Maybe some of you are familiar, or most of you are familiar with the TV show. It was largely successful, very well known in Central Europe in the let's say late 1980s and early 90s. And I guess that this is when this location got its name, Dallas, as a hugely ironic name for the settlement of the Roma who got there. So how did they got there? Oh, and there was a film as well, Romania, Hungarian, German co-production called Dallas Pasamende, which must have been the idea must have been coming from this location, which was known as Dallas, and I think the film was mostly shot at Patarat. It's from 2005. So how did the Roma end up here? They were originally brought here in the 1970s as factory workers, and the place where they lived was based on the old co-op building. Western European viewers might not be very familiar with this term. In the let's say communist countries before the revolutions of '89 in Central Europe, agricultural production has been organized in so-called co-ops. So no one had any private property, and everything was owned by the co-op, and people in the co-op, like the bosses, told everyone what to do, and they received produce and some money in exchange for their work. It was obviously a very abusive and horrible system, but we don't really need to talk about this right now. But it was an old building from that, let's say, farm, and they started living there. But the factory, I don't know if it stopped working very soon, or it didn't. They didn't even finish building it, but the Roma were just stuck there. So they were brought there that, okay, you will work in this factory, but the factory never came to be. And they were stuck there with no money, and that's when the first settlement of Patarat was born. Then in the 90s, the one called Rampa was formed in such a way that policemen started bringing Roma, like abducting would be the proper term, I guess. So they abducted Roma in the city and they brought them to this community, and they threw them out there and beat them up and left, and then came back again to beat them up again and again regularly. And I don't know if it's for fun or for whatever, but they usually burned their shacks they managed to build at frequent intervals. So it's obviously a blatant example of very systemic abuse and like racist abuse. So this is the second, let's say, iteration, the second development cycle of Patarat. The third emigration wave is called Cantonului in Romanian. The canton. It's an area which has the worst criminal situation right now. Our community is burdened with drug abuse and human trafficking, and originally they were recruited from the victims of the pyramid scheme called Caritas. There has been a big scam, is the word. Sorry. So there has been a big scam going on in Romania. Many people fell victim to it, and many Roma fell victim to it. It's a pyramid scheme. And they lost their properties in the city. And many of those who are affected were resettled here. And also in Cluj, there have been development areas from where the Roma have been just evicted, basically. And all of them who were evicted were brought there. It's been an insanely abusive action. Like, imagine they have not been moved properly, but the city sent garbage trucks, and the people threw the stuff, the furniture, everything of the people who lived in the houses, in the flats, perfectly normal middle class homes, and probably a lower middle class, but still a very like a normal city dwelling community. That's what you need to imagine. And garbage trucks came, and people just threw their stuff. The movers threw their stuff into the garbage truck. Their furniture, computers, whatever they had, TVs, whatever. Everything broke, everything got dirty, and they dumped it when they arrived to Patarat and said that, okay, this is your new home now. And the fourth phase of Patarat was Coastei. Yeah, this is the one I mentioned earlier. Sorry, I mixed it up a bit. So the third emigration wave is almost exclusively due to the victims of the Caritas scandal. And the fourth phase is the Coastei. And this is when, on December 17th of 2010, 300 Roma from the street called Coastei in Cluj were resettled here forcibly, in a way I mentioned earlier. 42 families were accommodated in buildings of dubious quality, so there have been some shacks built for them. But 76 families were just dumped here, like built something from the garbage for you. 2010, so it's not like Ceausescu times or something. Okay, so you can see that a place like Patara doesn't simply, it's not a natural development that Roma just pop up and start to live near garbage and Of course, once something like this is set up due to decades of abuse, then there is going to be an ongoing process that other people might be drifting there. I don't know, who lose their homes or something because they know that at least there are some people live there and they can help each other. What I can say or see based on this history is that it's definitely complex. It's multi-layered. It's a multi-layered problem, and systemic abuses lead to this situation at the border of Cluj. Okay, so now we are taking a short break, and I want to check and show you the history of Patarat from another point of view. Okay, so investigating trash mismanagement. Are EU funds wasted in Romania? This is a Deutsche Welle documentary about Patarat. So, let's see. Hello, here I am again. So, just a quick word. What we have already seen from this documentary, like new information, let's say we uncovered, is that more than 300 million euros have been spent on improving the garbage handling in Romania, and it was explicitly said that a big chunk, we don't know what that means, maybe 100 million, maybe 50 million, maybe 30 million, whatever, it's a lot of money. A big chunk of 300 million has to be a lot of money, whatever that number is actually. So it's been spent directly on Pataret or Patarat. So, or Pataret, I'm not sure about the Romanian pronunciation, sorry. So, you could say that there has been some sort of very tactical, very practical, and very direct action in the case of Pataret. But you can also say what this gentleman said. Unfortunately, this image of him is not very, it's his back, but I just wanted to stop for a quick thought. So they experienced basically nothing, no improvement at all. So even if there are like tactical level developments, they are not making their mark. They are not effective. So the situation is kind of course, we are 5 minutes in. We are yet to see how much value actually this 300 million euro investment, or the chunk of it. So how much of the big chunk of the 300 million investment, how much value does it generate for Cluj actually, for the city of Cluj, not even mentioning the Roma who are living at the very edges of Patarat. We don't know it yet, but we can assume that something is off. And one thing that we know for sure already is that the local community hasn't experienced any sort of development from that. So the situation is even worse than we thought at first, because it's not like effort is missing. There are a lot of money spent already to tackle these problems, and the effectiveness of them is zero, so we are wasting resources. Okay, so instead of looking at these danger zones as opportunities for investment, we mismanage them so hard that we actually burn taxpayer money on them. So they generate more problems than the problem itself. They are wasting resources, and so this is looks like a major flaw in the system. In general, by the system I mean everything on national level, EU level, it doesn't matter at this point. But all we can see is that there, at least in the case of Patari, it seems like there are efforts, there is some sort of direct action going on, but it's not delivering results. So it's worth taking a look at it. So let's see where this documentary takes us.
He doesn't expect much.
And somehow doesn't it feel very sad that you know, you need guerrillas like this guy to, I don't know, he's planting on the ordered cameras on the trees to actually film the discrepancies to how, according to the regulations, this garbage dump should be operated. It's kind of Kafkaesque, to be honest.
As long as
And instead of, being instead of a regular authority coming here and just to check that does it working according to what you got the money for or not, it's quite sad.
Europe is happy with PDFs, and they are, and they have been, and they will be, Romania will have no problem in producing more nice-looking PDFs.
I haven't found out who is to blame for this mess, but
Okay, so what we have learned maybe in this documentary is that the problems around Patarat are systemic, and what you basically see here based on this documentary is that there has been a huge garbage collection and selection and treatment facility built on instead of illegal garbage dump with all the bells and whistles. And what you see here is that the new facility is basically a dump, and all the bells and whistles, all the high technology solutions, all the environmentally friendly stuff, all the cutting edge solutions are not included, but the bill is the same. So this looks like a very high level corruption kind of stuff. And this would explain to us that why literally no one is answers when a Deutsche Welle journalist just wants to ask very basic questions and he gets no answers to the emails. The local authority knows that everyone who works at the municipality probably knows that this subject should be avoided. You should not talk about it because it's a big mess and it's probably some sort of corruption in the background because the pricey technological solutions are not implemented, but it's been paid for. So someone took that money and shipped it out of this project, and that's corruption, and it's probably connected to organized crime in some way. And here I would also like to mention that the Roma communities around Patarat, at least some of the four, let's say, sub-communities or part of the communities, at least one of them is heavily affected by human trafficking and drug abuse. And we don't know exactly what that means. It doesn't necessarily mean that they all are only using drugs. Maybe there is some sort of organized crime activity going on as well. So there is this growing, let's say, concern in me about this whole story, because obviously we have been talking about the lack of action, the lack of direct action, and the lack of solutions on the tactical level, like getting clean water to these communities who are stuck there and this kind of stuff. Obviously, you will be not able to do anything like that if even the proper working, the proper execution of the processes in this dump, they are technically not up to the standards. They are not doing what they should be. So something like this simply cannot exist without without the highest levels of the leadership of Cluj knowing about it. I mean, it's just impossible to imagine. So if they let this happen, obviously they will not be motivated to even touch the subject of the living conditions of the Roma around this facility, or the ongoing human rights violations, because human rights violations are like cherry on the top of the cake or something, because it's a very big, very smelly cake right now. As you can see, there are very serious legal concerns. So there are probably many laws broken when we are looking at what's going on at Potarad. So it's not just about, I mean, just, of course, in exclamation marks, or how these are called, quotes. Okay, so of course human rights are maybe the most important, but there are very direct laws that are being broken here. So obviously, if those can be broken, then we cannot hope that local political forces will cooperate when you want to protect the human rights of the people who live in the area. I hope it's clear what I'm trying to get at. So I would like to introduce you finally to Anne Scheinberg, Spring Loop Cooperative, if I remember correctly. Close to the end of the conference, she brought up some very practical and very useful, interesting things I would like to share with you once I get my voice back. Hopefully, I will have some more. There's not much I want to tell you. So, not much left, I mean. So, Miss Scheinberg is working for a waste management NGO, and she said that she has visited landfill sites in more than 50 countries. 50 countries. She struck a very sober, very practical tone. She referred to her when in her closing sentence, she referred to it as "Thank you for listening to my grandma speech," but it was kind of nice to hear, but it was also really refreshing, because obviously by the end of the day, you can imagine that this conference, I mean, it was highly politicized, very high level, complex subjects, and very theoretical instead of tactical, which is one of my key points, I guess. And she drew the attention to the fact that local governments and state bodies, so how should we approach these kind of problems? And she said that when there is an illegal landfill, and at this point, let's ignore the fact that Potaret has been illegal for decades, and there has been an illegal garbage dump in the middle of it for decades, and it has been cultivated, so to speak. But as we saw in the documentary, things are not even far from perfect, they are far from complete, let's say. So it's even worse. So there's a new facility which should be top notch, and it's just a new landfill which will fill up very quickly, and then the problem will just re-emerge, because obviously it will probably go on working illegally, and who knows how this will be solved later on. But right now it seems like a money milking scheme for some kind of powers that be. We have no proof of this whatsoever, but it seems blatantly obvious. So when you find a situation like this, that you have an illegal landfill around the city, you should never remove it without creating a suitable alternative. Because the landfill is there for a reason, and the reason is that people are taking their garbage there illegally. And if there is no place for them to do so, then they will just manage this situation any way they can. So the garbage will appear on the side of the lakes, on the creeks, parks, whatever, forest nearby, everywhere, because as she put it, the garbage has to go somewhere. It always goes somewhere, and if it can't go in a heap, in a garbage dump, then it will go to the forests and the streams. She also said that in many cases the waste is of the waste there is sorted illegally. So there are people who are on the illegal garbage dump who are doing recycling and garbage selection completely illegally because there's money in it. So they pick stuff from the garbage which industrial buyers can buy up in bulk and use them as resources. Okay, this is the basic principle of recycling, of course. And she said that in many cases the waste is illegally sorted because that's how people that is to make a living. That is how they are living off of it, basically. And in the case of Patara, this is what they have been doing for 3 generations now. From the 70s until the 2010s, it was completely illegal, and now we are in some sort of gray zone. But most of it is probably illegal so far. So now we have grandfathers who are teaching their grandchildren. Words are getting hard, sorry, on how to pick garbage, honestly. Anyway, it still has a value creating effect. So it's completely illegal, but it creates value because the garbage is getting selected. At least some of it is going to get recycled. Now, how it's getting recycled? Obviously, there are middlemen who are buying this up from the people who are picking it on location. Some people who have connections come to them and buy the material from them in bulk. And she said said that it's very important to not cut them out of the process instantly. So you have to treat, even though what they are doing is completely illegal and it's done in completely illegal terms, they should be approached somehow with a valid proposition, where they can, because they already have a system in place, and many people's living are hanging on them. They are the connection for a lot of people. They are connection to money, the money where what they can buy food with or whatever, like a very basic self-sustenance. Okay, so they should be treated as partners and not persecuted when let's say the authorities arrive and they want to stop, well, how to do this, recultivate this illegal garbage dump, close it down and clean the garbage. That's usually not what happens, but at least create a legal garbage dump then in its place, and do not persecute the people who are organically basically involved, or their fates are intertwined with the garbage dump. They are like, it's like a nature, it's like a symbiosis. So you just can't sterilize it because the communities will suffer immensely. And this, what she said, echoed to what the Roma activist said, who told us that it's not like no one knows about this problem. It's like they have been visiting Brussels and the European Parliament and the European Commission. Some of them have been doing this for several decades now, or more than a decade, without really significant progress. And usually what, for example, activists like Linda, Greta, Giga, she said that the thing that's missing most is that actually listen to the Roma communities themselves. So approach the problem with a clear dialogue, open dialogue. Like, what do you need? how can we help? This is the approach that they would like to see from everyone, the NGOs, the EU, the local authorities, everyone. Just ask. And you don't have to obviously give them what they want per se, but at least you can get a better picture if you involve the decision makers. And one thing about the Roma communities is that, of course, they are very colorful, and not two of them are exactly the same. And I don't want to standardize or generalize, but one thing you can say is that a high percentage of the Roma communities are pretty much traditional in the way that there are key decision makers in the community who they are listening to. And of course, they are very resistant to outside influence. So when someone comes and tells that, I think that you should do this and that, they will ignore it because they are not listening to outsiders. Again, that's the other half, that's the other aspect of the historical connection, the historical communication, the historical social connection between the majority populations of Europe and the Roma. So it goes back, it goes both ways. There are some things that have been developed in centuries within the majority population when they think about the Roma, and vice versa is the same for the Roma. And maybe it's like the Roma culture or populations. I mean, they go back not even not centuries, but millennia. And they have these roots and they have these systems in place. And of course, there are lots of Roma communities that are completely modernized and have no ties to, let's say, their original cultural backgrounds, but many of them still do. So what I want to do is that actually you have the tools. You have the tools. You have to identify these decision makers they listen to, and you have to maintain an open dialogue with them to solve the real problem. And it's even better than in majority societies, because mostly, if you take a look at any European society, we are not organized that way anymore in a clear sense. Hungarian or French or German or Czech or Slovakian or Romanian communities, if we can even use this word, societies would be a better word, are not organized like that. We don't have these key decision makers in our family who we listen to. Of course, we listen to our parents and in some extent to the grandparents, but it's not like it's not so clear cut. And the fabric of our family or organization is different to how the Roma do it. They have a more resilient system in place because they are used to it. For centuries, they are used to that. They have to rely on each other very hard because the environment is kind of harsh. And anyway, they are living in a traveling kind of life, or have been, of course, where the majority, being integrated into the majority society is not that important. It's you can just adapt. The key is adaptivity. So I thought this is interesting, and it has some logical. So this is very much not like we do it, I think, right now. It's not like we have these problematic communities, problematic in the sense that they are suffering day by day. Their human rights are violated, but they are not approached by, let's say, professionals who are act with big tools, who have the money, who can make decisions and who can call the shots. And these professionals are not going to their decision makers. They're not spending the time to identify the decision makers in a respectful way and set up a two-sided open dialogue with them and work on the problem together, identify the sub-problems of the main key problem, that you actually don't have clear water right now, or your children cannot go to school because they have to crawl through the mud, and once they arrive to the school they are muddy, and then they just don't let them visit the school because they are muddy. So once you identify these key problems, you can tackle them one by one together with them. I mean, this is what seems like a possible like, I'm not saying this is a solution, but just a direction which could be maybe analyzed further. So my closing thoughts: empathy, interest, turning around and being treated as a partner. So this is what N said, and practically these are the same values that the Roma present, according to their words. They just would like to have the same, to be asked about their problems. In the case of Patarat, and it's been the same for 50 years now, so maybe we could just give this a go, give it a try. Okay, so I think that's all I can say right now. I'm not completely finished with my report, but our time is running up. So thanks for watching this, if you did, and either on Twitch or on YouTube, because this will be on YouTube. And be on the lookout. We will have a YouTube channel set up just for the Intel Grove. So this kind of, let's say, show investigative, real-time research about certain threats to the EU ecology and economy and society. And beyond the YouTube videos, you will be able to read articles based on these videos and maybe some extra stuff. We are planning to set up a Substack as well. So hopefully these will be in the video descriptions by now. But if not, then bear with us and we will go on. We've got many things to say about this subject, and even I have some personal thoughts, let's say, about the conference that I don't have the time to share right now. So we will be back hopefully soon enough. And I guess that's all for now. So thank you for watching, and be on the lookout for more and interact with us and in any way if you can. Okay, we are the LSG 404 handle. You can find this on find us on Twitter, for example. And yeah, I think that's it for now. And see you soon.